people, I'm Allie.
And I'm Lizzie, and we're the Photo Sisters.
Today we are going to tell you some quick tips and tricks for photographing your first wedding.
So first and foremost, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes of shooting a wedding. So if you've never assisted or second shot a wedding, I would highly recommend that you do that. Email as many photographers in your area as possible to see if you can go to the wedding, and please offer to do it for free if you don't have any experience. But the knowledge that you gain is completely priceless and invaluable to learning what to do, because you know, it's just as much shooting the wedding as it is understanding the flow of the wedding, how the day goes by, and what you do behind the scenes. So that would be our first tip, is to make sure that you have at least 1 or 2 weddings under your belt before you jump into taking pictures at your first wedding, because I'm sure you take beautiful pictures if you're ready to shoot a wedding, but you really need to understand what goes on behind the scenes first and foremost. So aside from that, the first start to your success as shooting your first wedding is to have really great communication with your bride and groom before the wedding. You want to know all of the main points. You want to know the time that the ceremony starts, the length of the ceremony, if they're doing a cocktail hour, if they're seeing each other before the ceremony, and that information is going to help you create a timeline. So before your wedding, you're going to email your bride and groom a timeline that outlines the time that you're taking all of the pictures, the bridal party pictures, the family pictures, bride and groom pictures, and that way too they can let their friends and family know when they should be ready for pictures. And another thing that I recommend is to get a list from your bride and groom of all of the family groupings that they want in their pictures, so that way they have lots of advance time to think about who they want to include. They make sure to tell those people that they're in the family pictures, and then come the day of, you can print out a little sheet that has all of the different groupings so that it's really organized. There's not a lot of chaos, and there's not a lot of stress trying to track people down or think, oh no, did we forget somebody? So make sure that you have really great communication with your bride and groom beforehand, and that you have all of the times down and could put in a timeline, because it'll make the day so much easier. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so make sure that you have a timeline and really great communication with your bride and groom. So our second tip would be to bring along an assistant and or a second shooter for your wedding. So Allie here is my assistant. She's been my assistant for years now. So I'm going to kind of let her tell you kind of what the assistant does at the wedding.
So bring an assistant with you, and this may be a friend or a photographer. It could be someone who has no idea what any lens or cameras mean, and that's totally fine. What you're basically looking for in an assistant is somebody who's going to organize the day for you, carry your gear, and set up your gear. If you use any off-camera flashes or any tripods or light boxes or anything like that, that's something that you're going to just kind of designate to your assistant to take care of.
Yep, and like when I was just talking about the timeline, I give the timeline to her,
and then it's my job.
She'll be like, we need to go, bridal party pictures start in 5 minutes. So that way I can focus on capturing the moments instead of constantly checking my clock and checking on the things that need to get done, because I have her for that.
And it kind of makes, and I know this sounds awful, but it kind of makes me not so much the bad guy, but maybe the police, kind of the security enforcer, because I will walk with the groom, and as 20 people are coming at him, I'm like, oh, you know what, he'll be right back, we're just going to take him out for some pictures.
She's like a verbal bodyguard.
It's real quick, and then it's not the photographer that's being the bad guy, the pushy person who's like, hey, who's that person that just took him away, and they really have no clue who just took him away.
Yeah.
So
and then too, like during family pictures, she'll like I said in advance, I get all of the groupings listed out in advance, so she's able to kind of get the next group on deck per se, so that we can just like take people in and out of pictures as quickly as possible.
And then I have to go find Uncle Billy, because no one can ever find Billy, and it's my job to be like, Billy!
So it really takes a lot of pressure off of the photographer's shoulders to just know that somebody is there to help, you know, maintain order that can be wedding chaos.
And even as simple as changing batteries, if Lizzie is across the room during a ceremony and needs something, you know, it's just,
Or her.
it's just a lot easier. And it's very easy for me to roll her suitcase of gear so she can kind of be hands-on doing the photography instead of worrying about bringing a suitcase along with her or watching the back row of the church to make sure it's okay.
To make sure Uncle Billy didn't just leave with my suitcase.
Which may happen
Yeah.
if you don't have an assistant. Watch
So,
out.
yeah, so I guess that leads into the next tip is to make sure that you have tons and tons of backup gear with you, because nobody plans on their equipment breaking, nobody wants it to happen, but it does happen. I actually, my second shooter one time during a ceremony, all of a sudden her sensor fell out of her 5D, and I'm not even kidding you, it even happened to me. Luckily mine was during a portrait session, but during the ceremony, like, if something happens to your camera, you need to have a backup camera, because you can't say, okay, everybody, stop the ceremony while I figure out what to do. So that's, you have to have backup equipment, and I like to store all of my backup equipment in my suitcase, and so that's what she watches out for. And not only make sure that you have that backup equipment, but make sure that it has batteries in it that are charged and ready
It's
to
fully
go.
ready to go.
A memory card, so that if you are in the situation, if your camera breaks or something happens during the ceremony, maybe all of a sudden it says error, or, you know, it can happen.
You cannot redo a wedding day.
No.
You cannot redo a bride getting into her dress or the vows or anything. You just can't redo it. So it is on you. It's stressful, and it's on you. So you need to be ready for the unexpected.
Yeah, so that's really, you know, make sure that you have your backup equipment ready to go, have an assistant so that they can watch out for it, and then also too, you can signal to them. I could be like, my camera broke, and she could start, you know, getting it out, getting my replacement camera out of the suitcase. So it's really teamwork, and so yeah, make sure you have your backup equipment. If you don't have the money to buy a second camera, which, let's face it, if you're doing your first wedding, you may not, which is fine. I would really recommend renting from borrowlenses.com. We will link to them below. Or you can see if any of local camera shops around you offer camera rentals, but there's really no excuse not to have backup equipment.
Bring your iPhone too.
Yeah.
Great cameras.
Hopefully you can get the 5S. Anyways, so, you know, make sure that you have that backup equipment ready to go, that you're familiar with it, because, like I said, it can happen that you need to use it without, you know, the ability to pause the ceremony, because, you know, when they stand there and they're like, does anybody have anything to say? What's that phrase?
I don't know if they do that anymore.
Speak now or forever hold your peace. What if you were like, hang on a second, everything's good with the couple, I just need to figure out what I'm gonna do with my camera. So, expect the unexpected, make sure that you have backups. If anything, it's just a good peace of mind. And not only for equipment, you also want to make sure that you have several backup batteries, memory cards, make sure that you're good to go in all those areas, because yeah, you can't run to the store or pause things during a wedding day or redo it. So it's better to have it there and not use it than to run into a disastrous situation where you need it and you don't have it.
And then you're going to want to, if you can, bring a second photographer. Definitely bring them along if you can, because they're going to get some extra shots. A lot of times when we do weddings, we'll send our second photographer to the groomsmen's room where they're all getting ready to get some shots of them. So
yep, and then, you know, these are things too where if you go to a wedding and you kind of see how they work on the back end, you know, I'm not talking about like, oh, I've been a bridesmaid in weddings or I've been to my friend's wedding. You really want to go and work a wedding and have a non-shooting, non-stress position, because then you can see, you know, like who takes pictures of the groom getting ready and when does that happen? I mean, it's obviously going to happen before the bride and groom see each other or before the ceremony, but you can get a good feel for, you know, kind of how timing goes. Now, as far as timing, like, you know, you're going to talk to your bride and groom beforehand to get a feel for the flow of their day and, you know, what they're expecting. But when you're building your timeline, I generally start photographing the bride no less than an hour before the first look is happening.
And that's even pushing it.
Yeah, that's pushing it.
Not a lot of time.
Yep.
Because brides are always running late.
Yes. So we usually plan, you know, for the bride to start getting into her dress no less than half an hour before the start of whenever we're starting pictures, or whenever they need to be ready for something. And even if they say, oh, you know, it doesn't take me 5 minutes to get into my dress, it just zips up. like she said, brides are usually late, and there's nothing against that, but you know, sometimes makeup runs longer than it's supposed to. Maybe somebody's late, maybe something happened with the hair and they had to do it twice. There's all sorts of things that can happen that push the schedule behind, and it's pretty much expected that it's not going to run on time. So you always need to give way more time than you think, because it's always better to have extra time for portraits or to be sitting there ready for things to go than having to rush things and being even more stressed out about it. So,
and remember, you work for the bride is always right.
you know, and then of course there's the whole photography aspect. If you're thinking about shooting a wedding, you need to really think about how your photo skills are, because if you take portraits and wedding photography are really not the same thing at all, because portraits you can somewhat control the situations that go into a portrait. You can usually, you know, aim for optimal time of day that you take the pictures. You can usually take your time if you're running late. But when it comes to wedding days, you know, you can't control the time that you take portraits. So you might have to be outside in the middle of the day when lighting is really harsh and not optimal to work with, and take family pictures or bridal party pictures outside, or ceremonies outside, and half of it might be in complete shade and half of it might be in complete sunlight. So you really have to know how to control your camera settings and deal with different lighting situations, because there's so much on a wedding day that you can't control, that you really need to feel confident in your skills, that you can roll with the punches and be able to shoot in really difficult lighting situations and still have the mental capacity to roll with being really stressed out, with having, you know, 5 minutes for portraits when you were supposed to have half an hour for portraits. Like there's...
And that happens
and
more
it
often
happens more often than not. There's a lot of times, you know, and then for the reception, you obviously want to, you know, talk to your bride and groom beforehand and see what type of reception hall or setting that the reception will be in, because there's a really big difference between lighting an outside reception versus lighting an indoors reception. So,
and then also, if the reception happens to have a DJ, make friends with the DJ quickly.
The DJ is your friend.
Because you can ask him to move things around a little bit, or say, you know, it would be awesome if you could do...
Sorry, I just got really thirsty.
It would be awesome if we could bump the cake cutting even 5 minutes early, and they always are willing to work with you if you're friendly with them. So make friends with them, make friends with the caterer, because everyone likes to get dinner.
And I guess this is a tip too. It helps to talk with your bride and groom beforehand about dinner, because it's really important when you've been on your feet for 6 hours. You kind of want to know if you should pack a dinner with you, or if you're expecting to get fed.
And 6 hours, that's like on the small end. Typically, you're there like 9.
Well, 6, because sometimes the reception takes 3 hours.
Right.
So, like, usually I would say most of my weddings are between 8 and 9 hours.
Plus travel. Mm-hmm. And usually our weddings are like an hour away.
So, and not all caterers, you know, think of vendors and their food count. Some of them do, some of them are great. So that way it comes in handy to have, it goes back to communication with your bride and groom to make sure that they know how many people are going to be with you, kind of what to expect for dinner, so that they can let their caterer know. And then if they're not feeding you, which don't feel entitled to it, because it's expensive and maybe they just really can't afford it. So, but it's best to be prepared. So if you need to bring some PB&Js with you, that sort of thing. And I guess another tip...
Or have your assistant run to Paradise Bakery, which I have done.
Yes, and I guess this comes into another tip. It's really nice to have snacks with you. If you keep them in your bag, like granola bars, almonds, usually there's a few minutes... Gum. Usually there's a few minutes before the ceremony that you can, like, just pack in some food really quick. If you're like me and get headaches, Excedrin is a necessity for me to have with me. Plus it has caffeine in it.
It's a necessity for me to be like, do you need your Excedrin yet? Here, drink more water.
Yeah, so make sure that you come with really good, easy-to-eat snacks, because you'll get really hungry carrying your gear and running around. And
for sure. All right, if you have any questions, leave us a comment below or ask us a question on Facebook. We like it. Alrighty.
Thank you guys for watching.
Bye.
Bye.